This is a Federal Leadership and Professional Development Seminar Series seminar on resilience in times of stress and uncertainty, and it's being presented by the Department of State by Peter Redmond and Eric Cipriano. Next slide, please. The sponsors for today's event, or the support for today's event is coming from AHRQ Magic. They're providing event day logistics and support. We have Siobhan and Monica on the line helping today. And GSA DigitalGov University is supporting the webinar platform, and we have Alex S and Alex Y online today. Next slide, please. As always, unless otherwise noted, no statement in the seminar should be construed as an official position of any federal agency. Next slide. So just briefly, what is the Federal Leadership and Professional Development Seminar Series? It's a by government and for government seminar series covering leadership and professional development topics and also best practices. Next slide. The seminar series was started back in 2017. It's open to all government employees. Most are SES sorry, not most, but they range from GS1 through SES, so it's the full gamut. As far as the speakers, most of the speakers are SES or in other leadership roles, but these also vary as well. Attendance is usually in person or remote, but for the time being, all of our seminars are fully remote due to the pandemic. Our frequency is usually about every couple of months. It's an unfunded series, and there's no cost for attendees or payment to speakers. Next slide, please. The goals of the seminar series are to facilitate connection between federal employees and with federal communities of practice, also to help with sharing of federal expertise and lessons learned, to help provide professional development opportunities that are no-cost opportunities, to help with problem solving for common hurdles, to provide access to the resources and of the seminar series and other learning opportunities, and for partnership with and promotion of similar events. The vision of the series is to build, retain, and connect a more collaborative, engaged, and capable workforce with the tools and expertise needed to more efficiently and effectively serve the public and ultimately go further, faster together. Right now, we have almost 4,800 folks on our listserv list, so it's really been growing steadily. Each seminar, we usually have between 350 and 1,500 participants. We did have about 1,500 folks who registered for this seminar. Right now, we have around 800 online, but there will also be many who will be calling in separately. Each seminar usually has between 40 and 60 different agencies attending. Right now, we have 12 seminar videos on the YouTube channel and 6 on max.gov. Next slide, please. Today, as of, this is actually as of Sunday, so there are probably a couple other agencies that have been added, but we have 49 agencies attending today. So it's great to see the breadth of attendees that are attending. Next slide. For more information, feel free to contact me. You've seen my email address on all of the correspondence related to this seminar. Also, if you're not already on the listserv and you'd like to receive future announcements, the instruction is here, and it's also in all of the registration information as well. The YouTube channel link is provided here, as well as the max.gov link. These are also in the correspondences received through the registration platform. And our webpage link is listed at the very bottom as well. Next slide. So coming this fall, as an announcement, our organizational culture and culture change workshop is being postponed to October. So I'll be sending out an announcement about that. And we also have a new seminar coming up on accessibility in Section 508. Just a brief announcement about our action teams. We're going to have a sequential rollout of these teams. The Section 508 team has already started, and thanks to them, they helped convert the last seminar slides to make them 508 compliant, and today's slides as well. And you can see a list of other action teams that will be starting up, so let me know if you have interest in those teams. Next slide, please. So introducing today's speakers. So we have Peter Redmond and Eric Cipriano, and just a brief bio for both of them. So Peter Redmond is the director of the Center of Excellence in Foreign Affairs Resilience, which is CEFAR, at the Department of State's Foreign Service Institute. He's worked for more than 20 years in the foreign affairs community with the Department of State and with the Peace Corps. His passion for resilience began as an Adirondack mountain guide and continued as a Peace Corps volunteer in Honduras. and in his work with the EPA supporting communities impacted by toxic waste. After 10 years with the EPA, he returned to the Peace Corps in 2002 to lead programs overseas and in Washington, D.C., where he developed leadership and resilience training for overseas staff and volunteers. Peter earned an MPA from the Harvard Kennedy School, where he concentrated in negotiation and conflict resolution and public leadership. He has a Bachelor of Arts from the University of Rochester. Eric Cipriano is a senior resilience instructor at CEFAR, which he joined in 2016. Eric first joined the department as a Foreign Service Specialist in 2005 after a 20-year career as a behavioral science officer in the US military. He was the first Foreign Service social worker assigned to Embassy Baghdad from 2005 to 2008, and also served at Embassy Kabul from 2013 to 2015. Eric has also deployed with the military to Somalia, Haiti, Kosovo, and the Pentagon. In 2005, he was deployed to New Orleans immediately after Hurricane Katrina with the American Red Cross. Eric has a master's in social work from VCU and is currently working on his doctorate. He has co-authored 2 articles on frustrated aggression in UN peacekeeping missions, and he is an avid and active member of the Smithsonian Associates Program, always curious to learn about art, food, culture, and nature. Please welcome Peter and Eric.
Thank you, Kim. Appreciate that nice warm introduction.
And I'll share my screen now to put up our presentation. I want to thank you all for joining us today. It's a real honor and pleasure to be here. Let me take a moment here to set up my screen here. And I'm going to go to my animations, not slideshow. Okay, everything should be ready. Very good. So again, to be here is quite an honor at the Federal Leadership Professional Development Seminar Series. It's been a pleasure working with Kim and her team over these last several weeks to prepare for this. I want to thank especially our new program assistant at CEFAR at the Foreign Service Institute, Georgina Daniel, who is with us today as well, for helping us prepare this presentation. Eric and I actually have been doing this presentation for quite some time now. We've been together for almost a year now at the Center of Excellence in Foreign Affairs Resilience. I came over from Peace Corps after 17 years of Peace Corps. Eric actually was one of the founding folks who started up CEFAR back in 2016. So it's really my pleasure to come to work, to take all of my lessons that I've learned over my years with the federal government, with Peace Corps, with the EPA, and now helping our friends in the foreign affairs community and now our larger federal family in these lessons that we've learned about resilience. And today, Eric and I are going to talk about what is resilience, how to achieve it, or actually, we never fully achieve resilience. It's more of enhance, I think, resilience. I think Eric would agree with me there. And we're going to dig into the how-tos of personal resilience as well as team resilience at the end. And hopefully we'll have some time at the end for some discussion questions that we'll be able to use in the chat box there. Eric, anything else before we move forward?
Yeah, I do. And again, thank you, Kim, and thank you for everybody for being forward-thinking. This is a very relevant topic, as we have found for the last several months, doing a huge number of these webinars and seminars. I want you to take this course individually as a person, like Peter said. It's about understanding, contextualizing, understanding what resilience is and what it's not. But I'd also like you to use your other ear, your third eye, to see, is this program something that you can and should institute in your own organization? Like Peter said, we started in 2016, but the work had been done prior to that. A number of our colleagues in the State Department were deployed to Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan, and we found that if we really took a proactive approach to their well-being, their health, all these things about returning from very difficult and harsh assignments, we had better outcomes. And so I think there was a time and a place where we said, we need to formalize this. So the challenge to you guys is that this is doable. I mean, I think we don't need a good crisis to go to waste. We want you to be able to hear these program points, but also, again, can you apply it to your team? Can you apply it to your family? Can you apply it to your organization? And can you apply it more importantly, to your community. So, you know, please, Phil, if you have questions or comments, we have a lot of folks today, but we try to answer as many as we can, and we'll have an address at the end of our session today. So if you do have questions to how do you explore this and go further, we're happy to engage. So on that, Peter, shall we get started?
Yeah, very good. So we have these 4 takeaways we want to bring up right now as we move forward, and we'll review them again toward the end, but just to give you a heads up what we're going to be talking about. We're going to talk about focusing on small wins as a critical component of practicing resilience. We're also going to talk about resting your brain and offer you some resources on resting your brain. It's not just resting your body through sleep, but actually pulling back and finding some deliberate and intentional actions to rest your brain. We're also going to talk about nurturing, the importance of nurturing resilient habits and routines as the key to practicing that personal resilience. And actually that works with teams as well. And when we talk more about teams, we're going to talk about modeling, mentoring, and fostering teams. So those are our takeaways for today. And we're also, as we move forward, again, this is a conversation that we like to have. Even though we have hundreds of people online here, the chat box, as Eric likes to say, is gold for us. It's how we're learning about what's going on out there and how you're sharing with yourselves about what's going on with each other. So please do use the chat box. We look at this as a conversation. We're going to use a few polls as well to see how you guys are feeling about certain questions that we ask. So moving forward. So what is stressing you out? That's a question that we like to ask every group that we work with before we actually sit down with them. We often go out to posts, missions overseas, consulates. We work with domestic officers of the State Department. We ask them, what are the things that are stressing them out and how can we deal with them? Well, today, what we want to do is ask you, what are the things that's stressing you out? So in the chat box, share with us, what are those things that are stressing you out? And I'm seeing from Sarah, a great answer, Sarah, taking care of my 10 direct reports. All of the uncertainty, she adds as well. We have COVID, of course, Jody, thank you for sharing that. The news, God help us to following that. And I see the chat box is flying by, so there's a lot of great input here from you guys. Freshmen going off to college, and the unexpected nature of that. Kids needing to be taken care of, either their virtual training happening at your house if they're in there now, or the uncertainty of whether they're coming back. These are all things I'm seeing in the chat box. Eric, anything else in the chat box you want to jump out at?
Oh my gosh, yes. And I think I want to make a point here, Peter. You know, we know that uncertainty causes stress. Change is inevitable, but this has been a layered 4, 6, 8 months. Who knows how long this is going to last? But stress doesn't necessarily lead to uncertainty. There's something to be said about learning how to understand what is going on in the world so it doesn't control you, that you're somewhat in control of it. Now, this isn't going to be a stress management course. This is really to be talking about a key element that we all have, which is resilience. And you're going to notice, and it's in the popular press these days, we see a number of agencies in our own organization, in our own country, using the language, but we're really here to take this gradually and step by step. So, my gosh, you know, we could spend all day just talking about what's in the chat box, but it does narrow down to what's going to happen next, and can I adapt, and can I cope?
Yeah, you know, one of the things I'm also seeing, Eric, is this wide range of concerns, and from the things that you just said to simple, mundane things like no football season, things like things like that are really upsetting the daily rituals that we have in our lives, the habits that we have, the expectations we have, and this has really thrown us all off. So these are the questions that we ask when we go out and talk to people overseas at the State Department. What's stressing you out? And inevitably, what we hear from them, this is 3 of the many answers that we get. And this is pre-pandemic. Work overload, we're already seeing that in the chat box. Deadlines, of course, in the chat box. Interruptions, whether it's from our kids who are at home on our Zoom calls or other emails or calls. All of these things that really are the basic stressors that we have. This is all pre-pandemic. And then you throw the pandemic on top of that, you're having a whole other layer of stressors. Family health, your own health, work-life boundaries. In fact, one of the work-life boundaries, when we first started talking about this with the webinar series we did at the Department of State, one participant said, this isn't working from home, this is living at work. And so that really said to me, there's some boundaries that need to be drawn here. There's also the level of uncertainty that Eric was talking about. And this is a level of uncertainty that I was with the Peace Corps. Some of my Peace Corps colleagues are in here today. Hey, Ed from Department of Labor, I saw you're with us today. I know that, that's sort of what we deal with in Peace Corps. We love ambiguity, we thrive in it, but this level of uncertainty is really something I've never experienced before. And I think most all of us haven't ever experienced before, where it's really throwing us off our game. And so we really have to be more intentional about what our game's gonna be. Eric, anything more there?
Yeah, and I think that all of us, especially in the federal government, wherever you're at, whether it's GS1 to SES, we've all experienced difficulties, whether it's a furlough, whether it's a shutdown. I grew up in a generation called do more with less, Grand Redmond. We've all experienced these very difficult times, but we want to emphasize and remind folks, not only on a personal level, but also for the team and the organization, this is layered. Because we have one more additional layer, Peter, don't we? That really is having a profound effect on our nation.
Yeah, and we do. And for me, that the level of dealing with racial injustice, that's nothing new for our country. But it's certainly in the forefront of our national psyche now, with the public murder. Some call it the public execution of George Floyd in Minneapolis, and the ongoing list of names before George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, all of Tamir Rice in Cleveland, all of these others who are come to our national psyche, the forefront of our national psyche, and how this is challenging us to achieve the goals, achieve the what we aspire to as a nation, and understanding that we still have so much more to go. And so this is another layer of our stressors. So for us, we're actually seeing, as a resilience team, we've actually had many requests from groups that are out there right now who are dealing with the diversity, equity, and inclusion issues, and to know that there are some real resilience components to this as we, as you, fight for, advocate for greater equity and greater inclusion in your organization, in your communities, in the nation. Eric, anything more on that?
Yeah, I also want to say that there's also a lot of suffering out there, but there's a lot of overcoming it too. And when we deal with that, if you know who that quote is from, it's from Helen Keller. It's one that I have to remind myself that we all go through this very uniquely and differently. And that, Peter, that's what I'm saying from the chat box, is that there are different things that push people's buttons, or they're dealing with, or they're struggling with, or they take a lot of energy to deal with. And that's kind of the crux of today, is that the first step is to identify what is going on with yourself. Because we can't be a better me to be a better we. We have to start with ourselves. So, Peter, shall we kind of get a little bit more deeper into the subject?
Yeah,
here?
why don't we do that, Eric? So what is resilience? This is going to be our first poll today for you guys. We're going to give you a definition that we've come up with over the years at CEFAR, at the Center of Excellence in Foreign Affairs Resilience. You can go online, you can find hundreds of different definitions of resilience. There's community resilience, family resilience, structural resilience, you name it. But we've got a definition. But before we do that, we want to ask you, what are the things, if you could throw up that poll right now. I think we have, Siobhan's going to help with that. Take a look at this. What image most fits with your idea of personal resilience? And answer this in the coming few seconds. Water running through a rocky stream, a tall green bamboo stand, a mountain climber reaching a summit, or a tree standing alone in the desert like we have here in this image here. Take a look at that, and I'd like you to choose which one stands out for you as the one that most resonates with you as an image that fits with personal resilience. So we'll take a moment. So take a look at that.
Milo says all of them, which is true, Milo, it's true.
That's good. But, you know, there's some folks who actually will go toward others. So we'll give you another few seconds to fill out that poll, and then we'll share that with you. But in the meantime, as we're waiting for that vote to happen, and to actually fill it out if you can. I love that you're putting in the chat box, but also fill out the poll if you can. We're going to share with you our first half of our resilience definition. And that resilience definition is this: that resilience is the capacity to adapt successfully in the presence of risk and adversity. That's what you're doing now. That's what you've been doing for these last 5 months in your home, or actually if some of you had to be going to work, like many of us have had to, because it's the only place we can be. But regardless, we have changed our mode of operation, our daily practices, because of all these changes. And so it's how do we adapt successfully? I know I've done some adaptations that haven't been so successful. I know that chocolate cake waiting for me in the fridge is not always the best adaptation. Actually, on a momentary now basis, that can actually be very good adaptation. But in the long run, if that's your adaptation all the time, maybe not the best, which has been one of my issues over the years. So what we do now is this is what we're doing. We're adapting successfully. But there's also a component to resilience that's this second part of our definition. And it's the ability to bounce back and move forward from setbacks, high stress, crisis, and trauma. And what I like about this additional part of resilience is not just adapting successfully, but it's the bouncing back and moving forward. And that bouncing back and moving forward, really to me, it gets to the physical part of resilience in our lives. It affects us, our bodily, physically, mentally, emotionally. And so how do we bounce back from that to what they call homeostasis, getting back to normal? So our system, Kim?
Should we close the poll and see what the results are?
I was going to say, let's go ahead and close the poll and see what our results are.
Yeah, terrific. We'll talk about the polls in the result in a second. And I'll ask Eric to debrief on that. So the piece about bouncing back is when we have these stressors in our lives, we have a physical reaction. Usually high stress leads to high cortisol levels. Cortisol is a hormone in our body. It's released by the adrenal gland that is actually great for those fight or flight responses. But actually when we have this chronic, long burning, slow burning uncertainty and stress through the pandemic and other things in our lives, it actually hinders our health. It actually can cause greater heart disease, can cause foggy brain syndrome. There's all sorts of bad things that happen. And so what we try to do is we want to bounce back to normal, to regulate that level of cortisol. We're going to talk about some other hormones in a bit too, about oxytocin and other hormones that are great for our brain that are helpful as well. But right now we're talking about the cortisol. The other piece is the moving forward, and that is where we talk about trauma often leads to post-traumatic stress syndrome. There's also something in the research called post-traumatic growth. And that's what we're looking for here, that how you as a person decide to frame the challenges that you've been through. How does it challenge your values? How does it challenge your place in the world? And what do you do with that after the trauma? Eric, you want to share?
Well, let's kind of let me go backwards to go forwards. I'm sorry, many of you guys didn't see a poll question, but go ahead and put it in the chat box if you weren't able to do the poll. But
Actually, Eric, if you could pause for 1 second, I just wanted to say, Alex, if you could let the attendees know how to best find the poll for the polls, because they're not. It doesn't show up.
Note from Alex.
Yeah, look for the note for Alex there. You know, one of the things we really want to emphasize here, guys, is that so much of what we have done, and again, as a mental health counselor, as somebody who's been fascinated with social sciences and human behavior, we've looked at what was wrong with people, and we haven't necessarily looked at what was going right with people. Some of the work of resilience has come from a well-known author, Viktor Frankl, that you may have heard. Out of the concentration camps of World War II, he lost his whole family except for his sister, wrote Man's Search for Meaning, a very powerful book that I encourage you guys to explore if you're curious about the concept of resilience. We also looked at adverse childhood experiences, ACE studies, where these children were coming from incredibly difficult environments, and yet they were blossoming and blooming because they had that kind of support that was needed to grow. Instead of going down a dark path, they went down a very resilient path. So as we're becoming smarter, as we're becoming more experienced with resilience, I'm curious, guys, in the chat box, can you just use 1 or 2 words, your definition of resilience? The most popular image, I guess, that we all saw on the poll was water, and I agree with that. I'm a huge swimmer. But what's a 1 or 2 word? I see emotional intelligence, stubbornness, okay, stick-to-itiveness. You know, the idea of perseverance regardless of circumstances. I like the Zen saying of fall down 7, get up 8. You know, all these things are in our innate nature, but we all can find ways to not only explore our resilience, and especially in our teams and other people, but how can we enhance it and achieve it? So we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. So Peter, I'm going to throw
Alex,
it back.
if you could put up the poll. I know not everyone did get to vote. We apologize for that, but those of you who did, let's see what the results were of that poll. So the question, what image most fits with your idea of personal resilience? It's actually broken up into, we have 3 almost equal responses. So a water running through rocky stream, we had 34% of you say that was your favorite. That was the number 1. The second most popular was a tree standing alone in the desert, which is 32%. 27% said a mountain climber reaching a summit. And last but not least, with 7%, a tall green bamboo stand. Eric, what does that tell you about our group?
Well, I think we have a lot of different experiences. I mean, I like the bamboo because if you tried to get rid of bamboo, it's very hard to get rid of because the roots are well connected. It's very flexible, it's very strong, but it's tough to get rid of, right? And if you looked at water going through a rocky stream, it's this powerful effect of consistency that is taking this very difficult obstacle and moving forward. A very popular one that I saw not only in the chat box, Peter, but also in the poll is, you know, we have this ability to reach high points in our lives. Just as we have to start off at the bottom, we have to move up. But that struggle is what helps us motivate and move up forward up the hill. And when you're up at that hill, oh my gosh, what an incredible feeling that must be. And then, like I said, finally, for those that cannot see the poll, a tree standing alone in a desert, you know, that talks about thriving during harsh experiences and harsh times. You know, I don't want to sound cliche, Peter, but you have to bloom where you are planted.
That's true. And, you know, one thing I also like with the water running through a rocky stream, we could have actually turned that around to be more old school resilience. And that would be a rock withstanding a running stream. And sometimes people, when they look at resilience, they think, well, you got to be tough. You got to suck it up. In fact, I loved in the chat box, Mary shared the Marine Corps motto, which is actually perfect for resilience, which is improvise, adapt, overcome. And that's all very much on ourselves. This is something that we do, but Marines know that it's all about the team that gets that done too. And so, and I do want to shout out to our military friends as well. Much of the research that's gone on over the last several decades has actually come from the military. Many of the books written in the last couple of decades also built on some of the experiences that some of our Vietnam vets had as POWs and how they overcame those traumas.
But Peter, I want to, being a veteran myself and having served in the military, I do want to challenge the concept of resilience. It's not suck it up, buttercup. You know, there are times that it's critical that we need, excuse the metaphor again, to lean forward in the foxhole. We need to kind of use our energy and our focus to overcome and achieve very difficult times. But it's not about pushing in and pushing down and, you know, grinding yourself down to a pulp, because we recognize too, especially in the military and difficult deployments as well with the State Department, if we don't integrate rest and sleep and those positive things that really replenish us, then we're just going to be broken. And guys, I don't care what your program is, I don't care what your policy is, I don't care what your procedures are across the federal government. Our people are the most important asset. We have to take care of ourselves as well as those people on our teams. So this is the movement as we move forward that we've really been privileged to see with resilience, the growth and the desire of not only trying to achieve work-life balance, even though work and life are really out of balance, you know, we're seeing people adapt, we're seeing great ideas, we're seeing innovation, we're seeing people wanting to take care of one another, even with these extreme circumstances. So if you're here today, that's such a positive sign for us. But I'm going to challenge our audience again. And Kim, I really want people to take this conversation back to their organization and ask, how are we doing? How resilient are we? This is a continued dialogue with yourself, with your family, with your team, your organization, and your community. So, Peter, shall we move forward?
Let's move forward. I do want to give a shout out to the great answers in the chat box, though, Eric. So many of those great words came up: perseverance, flexibility, semper gumby. Thank you. Another shout out to the Marine Corps motto, almost. Tenacity, adaptability, spiritual, strength. All of those are great words that are really great synonyms. And we're going to talk more about how those apply in our 5 factors. Eric?
And Peter, just one thing. We are going to talk about the ability to translate this conversation into a leadership conversation. It's going to be part of this discussion, but we're going to start to give you the thoughts, the language, the ideas. If you have a resilience program, of course it can always be better, but if you don't, this is achievable, and we've seen the benefits not only with our Department of State, but we've also seen leadership incorporated in their language. So there's encouragement here. We are seeing a cultural shift.
Definitely. Okay, why don't we move on to our resilience factors? So along with the definition, when CEFAR started, we looked at all of the different resilience factors that are out there. And if you go on the internet, you'll find dozens of them. And some break them down into 12 resilience factors, some say 25, some say is 4, 3. We brought it down into these, what we think are 5 important factors for resilience in our foreign affairs family that I think translates nicely to the federal family as well. And that's this resilience circle that we have.
This one right here.
And Eric's got it. He was giving it away a lot earlier in the presentation if you're looking behind him. And so that resilience circle has resilience in the center of the Pentagon, of resilience, one of the strongest structures you can have. And as you notice in this circle, the top of the Pentagon is pointing to self-care. And there's a reason for that, because self-care, while all of these are important, and each of them, as you fill each one of these, they actually fill the resilience bucket. But so much of it starts with self-care. And the 4 areas of self-care that I like to talk about are you getting enough sleep? Are you moving? Are you exercising? Are you getting the right nutrition? And finally, 4th, do you have ways to manage your stress? And we're going to talk about, as we move forward, some of the strategies and activities you can do to achieve that. And within that self-care, there's a concept of keystone habits. And keystone habits was talked about nicely by Charles Duhigg in his book, The Power of Habit. And it's also talked about in another book by another guy who followed Duhigg, Atomic Habits, by James Clear. Some of you may know him as well. But Duhigg was really good, I think, in helping bring the keystone habit question, or the keystone habit idea, to the fore. And these keystone habits are habits that automatically lead to multiple positive behaviors and positive effects in your life. So if you do one thing, it's going to have a ripple effect in other parts of your resilience in your life. So one easy thing to talk about is sleep. If you focus on your sleep, I'm a guy, I used to be the guy who says, I can live on 5 or 6 hours of sleep and I'm fine. And I've realized over the years I was really doing myself a disservice, especially as I looked at the research and as I practiced more resilient practices, practice more, both getting more quantity and quality of my sleep, and I focused on those areas. And so if you focus on that one keystone habit, well, if you're more rested, you're more likely you're gonna work out. If you're more rested, you're going to be more clear thinking. You'll be able to do active problem solving. So all of these things are one of the benefits of focusing on a keystone habit. And so when we talk about, we'll talk about small wins, is just focusing on one of these things as we move forward. If you really want to make changes in your life, if you're trying to do all these major changes at the same time, we usually know where that goes. That usually doesn't work so well. So that's our take on self-care. The other part is, and again, one thing I like about the self-care piece is because of the physical benefits from that. So in all of those levels, you are reducing on all of those keystone habits, you're actually reducing the cortisol levels in your body. You are increasing endorphins if you're exercising. If you are doing other things like through social support, you're increasing oxytocin in your body. Oxytocin is the happy hormone that we get when we eat chocolate, when we make love, or when we look into a baby's eyes, or a person that you love and look into their eyes. So when we try to increase our own oxytocin and endorphin levels, we're doing our brain, our body a favor as well. So that's how we get the second one on social support. Meaning and purpose is also something that comes from how do we look at these challenges we're at. We have a strong meaning of purpose. That's it could be religion, it could be faith, it could be family, all of these things that we are drawn toward that give us meaning and purpose in our lives. The more we have that, the more likely we are to be resilient when our traumas are dealt to us. Eric?
So Peter, you know, one of the things that bind us together in the federal government is an important concept of meaning and purpose. It's service. You know, whether you're federal service, military service, providing a service, whatever it is, we're driven by the sense of service. Now, one of the challenges we have in our community, in our family, is that sometimes our core values can be shaken up for a variety of reasons. But that drive to do well for others can sometimes negate us taking care of ourselves. You know, somebody in the chat had mentioned, this looks a lot like EQ. Well, yes, because there has to be a sense of self-awareness. Because empathy, self-awareness, these are all part of this toolbox we are talking about to build upon each other. And again, if you're not taking care of yourself, how can you care for other people? You know, Peter, the metaphor I think I've used several times is, how does an empty water pitcher fill empty glasses? A lot of folks are tapped out. I see people when we're doing these that are dealing with their kids at home, teaching second grade math between answering the memo to the boss, you know, doing shift work. I myself are taking care of two elderly parents in their home. These are all challenges. This is just our normal, what we would normally say is, you know, leave work at work and don't take it home with you. But that's not our reality today. We are actually living where we work, like you said, Peter. We're also trying to build the airplane as we fly it. So this active problem-solving mode, another gift and talent that many of our federal workers do, can be really taxed, you know, when you're tapped out, if you're tired. But Kim, I'm so appreciative that you guys were forward thinking that this is a form of social support. It's an opportunity to vent. That's okay. I think venting is healthy as long as we have solutions along the way, or we have that interaction, that connectivity, that collaboration that can come out of things like today. But the hard one that we're seeing, Peter, and don't tease me, all right, is the sense of positive outlook. Now, this is not, I don't know anybody who's named Pollyanna-ish or wishful thinking. I myself, I'm a curmudgeon. I like my dark sense of humor. I love my Monty Python. I like Guinness beer. I like the dark side of life, okay? I don't have the luxury of staying there too long because I'm just not a positive, warm, fuzzy person. I'm not. I have my routine, especially in the morning when we have work, that I need to focus on myself, on my schedule, not on the emails. I've got to make that cup of tea. I'm not going to be nice until 9 o'clock. And then at 9 o'clock, I'm a pretty decent person. But as an introvert, as somebody is, I don't know, I'm Mr. Grumpy Pants. I don't have that innate ability, nor do some of us have all these at one time. That's just unrealistic. So there are areas we all can improve upon, right, Peter?
Well, Eric, I don't. I know you like to call yourself a curmudgeon. I like to call you actually an optimist who worries a lot.
I do.
And that really, to me, gets to the active problem-solving piece about this. You're not ruminating. So ruminating takes us down this spiral where we just it undermines our ability to act. What you're actually able to do is you actually are looking at problems, and you're looking for solutions to those problems. And I think that's one of the great things I love about working with you. But also, I think it's a great lesson for everyone here that you don't have to be an optimist, a Pollyanna, to actually to find the positives or reframe challenges that you might be facing. One of the, I want to answer, someone on the chat reached out and said, how do you convince supervisors to adapt when organizational culture is mission driven? And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. I just want to throw that out there later on when we talk about team resilience, because so much of this is all about creating a new culture in our organization that respects recovery, that respects rest, that respects that resilience as part of us being productive workers. It's not just being nice to people. It's actually, you're getting better productivity, getting better product, you're getting better work out of folks when they are practicing these resilience habits. And so these are all really things that I think are important. And we're going to talk some more specifically about some of these factors and how we can achieve them.
Shall we move on, Peter?
Yep, we're going to move on. So personal resilience inventory. Before we give you actually specifics, we want to do a personal resilience inventory with you. We're going to throw up another poll, okay? And these poll, we have 10 questions in this poll. I'm going to read each question, actually it's not a question, it's a statement that we're going to read out loud. We'd like you, for those of you who are able to take the poll, I'm sorry if some of you aren't able, if you don't have the technical ability to do it, but we'd like you to answer each one of these or click it if it's a statement that you agree with. So our 10 questions, our first question is, I take care of myself. I get enough sleep, exercise, and eat well. Number 2, when I'm stressed, I have things I do to help. When I'm stressed, I have things I do to help reduce my stress. Number 3, I have time for things I enjoy. For example, being outdoors with friends or other activities. Number 4, when I'm faced with a big problem, I usually find a solution. Number 5, I adapt pretty well to change. Number 6, I feel a sense of purpose in my work or personal life. Number 7, I feel like I'm growing. I'm learning new things. Number 8, my life feels busy and active in a good way. Number 9, when I need help from a friend, a relative, coworker, I ask for it. And number 10, my view of the world is pretty positive. So those of you who have access to the poll, fill it out. We'll keep the poll open for another 30 seconds or so, and then we'll review the results. But I love that folks are putting some answers who can't take the poll, they're throwing them in the chat box. What I would like you to do is, if you're willing, if you're brave enough in the chat box, how many of these did you answer or did you agree with? So if anyone's willing to share that, I see a 5, I see a 6, an 8, a 3, some 9s, there's a couple 10s even, a 9.5, 10s, 7s, 4s. Okay, so if you're 3 or 4s, you're totally in the right place, folks, because these are the kinds of things we're going to be talking about, how you can boost your resilience. If I take this test normally and I'm getting a 7 or 8 of these, I'm actually doing pretty well. I know that I have a lot of good things I can fall back onto when I'm stressed out, when I have a trauma affect me. But I also know there are things I can work on. If I'm actually hitting a 10, I think you're lying. No, I'm joking.
Peter.
I know they're not lying. They're just really, they're really killing it. And the fact is, we're probably speaking to the choir here with these folks who are answering 10 out of 10, that they've got some great practices going on. It's the folks who really are struggling, the 3s, 4s, or even 5s, even where you want to do more, that I think are going to get a lot out of this. Eric?
And I also want to remind folks that just because you perceive somebody doing well doesn't necessarily mean they are doing well. You need to ask everybody. You see, even the people who are optimistic and getting the 10 out of 10s, and I think this is a bit challenging because we respect your privacy. We really want to be able to have those healthy boundaries, even in these trying times between work and home life. But because the walls are getting very blendy, and very blurry, we want check-ins. We want people to say, hey, it's okay, whether you're a manager or a leader, whether you're a coworker, this kind of touching base is very important on a regular basis. Now, again, as a counselor, as a therapist myself, I hate when people say, how are you doing? And then they'll say, how are you really doing? Well, this is how I'm really doing. But it does take clear communication. I think Abe, you said it, and accountability for each other. Now, use any type of personal resilience inventory here. But when you look at the slide one more time and very carefully, now I'm going to challenge in the chat box, guys, what do you think federal professionals, federal government workers, the FEDIs, whatever we want to call you guys, okay? What do you think we're the most brilliant at out of the 10? What do you think we always see people say yes to? Out of which one? What do you think?
4, 6, 4. So when I'm faced with a big problem, that's the nature of so much of our work that we do in the federal government.
Exactly.
Yeah. 6, I feel a sense of purpose in my work or personal life.
Exactly. Now, let's flip the switch. Let's flip the question over. Out of public servants, as federal workers, as leaders, which ones are we the worst at? What do you think? And this is, again, we've done a good, how many have we done of talks, Peter? We've done
all the ones are coming out.
Exactly.
All the ones. Yeah.
Right. And again, the reason this inventory is here is you're going to see later on the importance of modeling this behavior, because we have to not only talk the talk, we literally have to walk the walk. We want you to take walks, okay? We want you to realize that problem solving and creativity and resilience all have this kind of common denominator, that you have to be that person who has the energy to do it instead of being tapped out. So again, this is not about bubble baths and sunshine. Don't get me wrong, I like the sunshine.
You like your bubble bath.
I do too, I will say that. Maybe that's a TMI, an overshare, sorry. But the reality is that this is really about resilience, is really about creativity and productivity. We want people to come to work with their best selves. Now, in pre-COVID time, I always loved asking the question, who has the worst commute in the room? And we have people commuting, at least here in Washington, D.C., anywhere from 2 to 3 hours. It's shocking, but some people use that time creatively. They use it as a way to detach. Some people use it as a time just to stress out to the max. So again, your personal resilience matters here, guys. Wherever you are, as a beginning worker, as if this is your first week for federal service, or whether you've been in plus 40 or 50 plus. I think, Peter, we had somebody who had been in the federal service for almost 55 years one time. It was amazing. And she was probably one of the most resilient people I ever met. She had great stories too. So
Hey, let's take a look at the poll result.
Okay, let's bring up the poll.
Can we bring up that poll?
Yeah, what was the answers? What do you guys think?
So I'm seeing a lot of folks who are really agreeing. I'm faced with the big problem. I usually find it. So 77%. And again, not surprised there. That's what we saw in the chat box. That's the nature of folks in the federal government. We're problem solvers. We're here to make things happen. So I'm not surprised in that. I do see, going to our lowest one, Eric, I think I'm not surprised there right now either. Our lowest is my life feels busy and active in a good way. And it's kind of hard to feel that way right now when we have so many limitations going on. I was glad to see, go ahead.
And along with that, Peter, it is hard sometimes to listen to the news or to hear this. And that's why one of the techniques as we go on is learning to turn things off, whether it's the news or social media. That quiet time, that play time has that power of restoration and resilience. But yeah, you guys are tracking pretty consistently with what we've done with different agencies and different organizations.
Yes, definitely. And going, we saw so many folks throwing number 1 up there too, about taking care of yourself, sleep, exercise, eating well, stress management. It's so interesting. I'm really looking forward to seeing the research that comes from the pandemic, that a lot of folks are going, I just saw one, it was Leonard, who said he's lost 35 pounds. Congratulations, Leonard. And that you're really working on self-care. And that's huge. It's a great thing to do. But I know a lot of other folks are having the opposite reaction. They're gaining weight, they're eating more, they're moving less. And that's, typical in this time as well. So, it's almost 50%. I take care of myself, get enough sleep, exercise, and eat well. It's 48% was the answer there. So,
okay, so we go to our next slide, Peter.
Go on our next slide there. Very good. So we're going to talk about small wins now. And as the things that we can do in our lives that don't take up too much energy, too much time, but can have a big impact. I was listening to, there's a great, some of you probably, especially if you're in the choir of resilience, you probably listened to a podcast called The Happiness Lab. And the Happiness Lab is run by a professor out of Yale. She's terrific. And she talks about, in one of her recent podcasts, she talked about making changes and changing habits in our lives. And the way we do it is by we reduce the friction. If we want to do something, we reduce the friction to make that happen. Or if we want to stop doing something, we want to increase the friction. So if we're making choices on food, say, going back to the 35 pounds that Leonard lost. So, reducing or increasing the friction on what you eat. As some research shows, something as simple as putting the cookies up on a high shelf actually makes it harder. We're less likely to go to those cookies than if we had them on a lower shelf. Or in the one research experiment they did, they actually put apple slices closer and popcorn, hot buttery popcorn, an arm's length away. The closer the apples were, the more likely you're to eat the apples. So, again, so you're reducing the friction for things that you want to do, and you're increasing the friction for things you don't want to do. So as we move through these small wins, I want you to think about what are the things that you two can do to reduce or increase the friction depending on which way you want to go. So with this practicing gratitude, you'll hear, but you've heard about that plenty of times over several years, especially. I remember when I was on Facebook several years ago, people were starting to do a gratitude list every day. They were putting in gratitude. Well, actually, the research shows that doing a gratitude list at the end of your day, sometimes people do it at the beginning of their day, but at the end of your day, just after 1 week of writing down 3 things you're grateful for. It doesn't have to be a book. It's just 3 simple phrases of things that you're grateful for. You just do it for a week. Your cortisol levels in your brain is reduced by 27%. That's a huge win. Practicing gratitude also, we can be not only practicing gratitude and saying stuff to ourselves, but something that Eric always is really good at, and that's saying thank you to actually people, actually saying it to their face. Eric, tell us about that. How do you do that?
Well, one of the things I think in any language or any culture, there's 3 words I think we all should learn, which is please, thank you, and how can I help? When we talk about building that social support, we talk about being bigger than ourselves. And again, I go back and forth. Yes, I want you to take care of yourself. I want you to acknowledge that, it just takes a lot of folks sometimes to get us through the day that we don't necessarily recognize or consider. And if anything, out of COVID, this has been a time of reflection as well, too. So by taking this very powerful and sometimes disheartening news, this is an opportunity to reach out and say thank you. Or, studies have shown, we have plenty of studies that are evolving out of resilience that let's say as you start a meeting, you start off with a thank you or acknowledgement or gratitude. People will perceive that meeting to be much more positive than if you just start off with a negative or you start off with a hardcore agenda. The acknowledgement, the simple award of saying thank you for your effort and your struggle has that powerful effect. As we talk about some of the negative biases, we tend to need that to survive. We're looking for the saber-toothed tiger out there, or the pothole, or the thing that's going to derail us. We're looking for because we want to prevent it. That's fine. I get it. We all have that negative bias inside of us. It is a survival mechanism. But as thinking and as feeling beings, by acknowledging thank you and support that person with the simple gratitude, you are making these connections, not only with yourself, believe it or not. When I say thank you to Peter, it's a win-win because I'm receiving just as much of a hit of a positive emotion, a positive hormone, a positive feeling as I'm giving to Peter. So again, I'm not asking you not to hold people accountable or to walk around saying thank you to everybody and to be, but when we start, I hope, to go back to work and we start to reintegrate, people are going to need to share their stories. And we have to acknowledge that the struggle is real. The struggle and juggle has been real, but we're going to get through this together. So whether it's staying connected, whether it's helping each other, I think, Peter, we saw laughter is such a powerful force in our lives. But I think it comes down to the final one, which is self-compassion. So shall we unpack this one a little bit, Peter?
Yeah, let's do that a little bit. So self-compassion, first of all, compassion is a key to compassion. It's being kind as well, right? Mm-hmm. Being kind to ourselves, is self-compassion. Being kind to others is compassion. There's actually a great article in the Washington Post that sort of gets to staying connected and helping others too, Eric. It was just in Sunday's paper, I believe, and it was about that Darwin. It wasn't necessarily they talked about wasn't necessarily the survival of the fittest, but more the survival of the kindest, and that's actually how we interact socially is much more of an indicator of our success as a group or a species than the actual physical strength or fitness that we show. And that's been one of the great parts about our evolution. A good article, I recommend it. But the practice of self-compassion gets to me. I mean, it really struck me, especially early in the pandemic. I saw some folks were saying how hard it is. It takes twice as much time to get stuff done at work or at home than it does at work because you don't have the tools, you're not seeing the people, and so we're being hard on ourselves. We have this thing running, this narration in our brain, this conversation in our brain that's saying we need to do more. The reality is we need to be more compassionate to ourselves. And one resilience guru that I really love called it being relentlessly self-compassionate and practicing that. There's a great, some of you like some of the apps that are out there. Some of the Calm is a great one. Headspace is another. On Calm, there's a woman who's also an author named Tara Brach. She has a book called Radical Self-Compassion, I think, and she's right on target about how that narration in our brain, we need to change the conversation so that we're kinder to ourselves, that we're treating ourselves the way we want to treat other people. So I think that's an important concept for us.
And Peter, I know it's about 2 o'clock, Kim. I know people are going to be peeling off, right? So that's fine. We are recording this session. It's going to be available through a variety of links. If you're going to be leaving now, we're going to be talking a little bit longer, just a little bit longer, about some other options for you. But please stay engaged in this conversation with yourself, your family, your community, your organization, but more importantly, to your team. So those people who have to peel off, great, we get it.
And we do have until 2:30 p.m. Eastern time, so.
We still got a lot more to talk about, so please stick around. We have some discussion. Again, the transition here is we're focusing on personal stuff. So how can you give gratitude and kindness if you don't start yourself? And again, that may sound airy-fairy, but the research is really backing it up. Treating people with civility, with kindness, with respect. Again, many of us that work as managers and leaders, or even as colleagues, realize that sometimes people go through very difficult and sometimes unproductive times at work. So how do we move this forward really depends on how we see ourselves and how we see each other. So start small. Do not negate the fact that small wins can have a big impact. So on our next slide, Peter.
Actually, I want to go to the chat box real quick. Shout out to Steve for pointing out the monkey brain, which is what I was talking about, the conversation in your brain, the running narration that you give to yourself and your life. But also I want to shout out to Michelle, one of our friends at the State Department, that she talks about, and this is something my wife really, it bothers her. I like to talk to strangers when I'm out walking or running.
You do, Peter.
And Michelle was just saying how much she loves that, and what that does actually, being kind, that level of kindness actually increases our oxytocin in our brain. We have that. We build those connections, even with strangers that we meet. Those strong connections are important, but those weaker, they call them weaker social connections, those are just as important for helping us feel connected. So it's not just about having a couple good friends, but it's also how you interact in the world at large. And also, Steve, he's suggesting smile more. Sounds like one of the lines from Hamilton. If you watched Hamilton lately, that was one of Aaron Burr's recommendations to Hamilton. Anyway, moving along to our next small wins, and onto our next slide. And these small wins we're talking about is about resting your brain. And you'll see the source I have here. This is a book. I'm not hawking it, but it's a great book that I've been using, and I've been going back to several times. It has great stories about the importance of rest and recovery in our lives. And it's not just about sleep. Sleep is a part of it, but there's so many other more important components to how we rest our brain. And I'm going to give you these 10 commandments here. But first, I'm going to just, number one, what I think is the most important part, take rest seriously. Taking rest seriously, actually, you'll see that someone asking, what's the book title? It's called Rest, Why You Get More Done When You Work Less. Of course, that's one reason that drew me to it. Of course, I want to work less and get more done, doesn't everybody? And you'll see the source at the bottom of the slide here as well. But the biggest takeaway from the research here is that we have to take rest seriously in order to have it make an impact. It's not we just don't do it as a, oh, that's what I'll do when I'm done with my work. You actually have to plan it, and you have to actually work it into your schedule. You have to be intentional about it. I think that's, for me, was one of the biggest takeaways from this. And this also gets to that question that was thrown out earlier by how do you convince supervisors to adapt to this when the organizational culture it's all mission driven. Well, to get your mission done, you have to take rest and recovery seriously. And that's what this book provides you a lot of really great background on that. I'm going to throw out the other 10, and we're just going to talk about a few of those. So the second one is focus your work. The third is layer your work and rest. The fourth is get an early start. Number 5 is detach from work. Number 6 is detach from devices. And again, that is so much a part of our lives now, those devices, and it's a very hard thing to do. We'll talk about some of the strategies for that. Number 7, take a week off per season if you can, if you have those annual leave days. Number 8, practice deep play. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Number 9, get plenty of exercise. We already talked about the importance of that and the value of that, and also get plenty of sleep. So Eric, tell us about layering work and rest.
You know, Peter, I would almost put work, rest, and play on this slide, because part of what we're asking people to do is not compartmentalize your life, because many of us start the day looking at social media. We're using our cell phones as alarm clocks. You know, we look at our feed before we feed our brain, you know, and rest is becoming a huge issue of sleep, a public health concern, because if you're not disconnecting, if you're not resting your brain, again, it's always kind of playing on the forefront or the background. So one of the things we've asked people to do is layer your work and your rest. We call it clunking, you know, or what is it? We want people to put things together in a way that makes sense for you. And I think this is one of the truisms that we're learning about this telework period in our lives, is that we are kind of seeing the 8 to 5, 8 to 6, 9 to 5. Whoever has that hours, I'm amazed. But we're finding that people are working at different levels and at different rates. And I don't know what the research is going to be at this point, but we're paying attention to how we are taking care of ourselves, taking care of work, and getting the rest in between. So one of the things I love to share,
Yeah, you know, go ahead, Aaron.
One of the things I love to share is when I was assigned, yes, this was a wonderful assignment in the military, to Italy, there was this thing called riposo. I don't know if anybody's been stationed or served in Italy, but everything stopped from about 12:30 until 3:30. And that was one of our, as an American, I was going, wait a minute, stop. We've got to work here. This is our most productive time. But in reality, I think it was right, because with very little air conditioning, people took the time and they came back to work recharged. They worked until 6, 7 o'clock at night. And again, this is a cultural thing. I don't know if it could take place here, but the power of layering work and rest made sense. So if you can do this, if there's alternative work schedules, if there's different ways to produce work and you get the same result, then why aren't we embracing this? So this is part of the cultural change I hope we really take the time to discuss and look at.
Well, another great part that this book discusses about layering work and rest is even, it's just within your day that instead of doing a full hour meeting that goes into another hour meeting,
oh my gosh,
have that first hour meeting just be a 50-minute meeting. So you have 10 minutes to gather your thoughts, to take a breath, to stretch your legs, to walk or do whatever, instead of just going from one Zoom meeting to another. I mean, those are, you know, it's not about willpower a lot of the times for making these changes, just making some innovative changes into your schedule and figuring out how you can do that. So that's one way to layer work and rest. They also talk about layering work and rest in the form of your vacations. So making sure that you're getting the most out of your vacations, that they know that after 8 days, the value of vacations actually diminishes. So really just 1 week is probably pretty good. And if you have the time to do it every season, if you can, that's the best way they found that you recover and recharge. The other piece about detaching from advices, I just want to shout out to the chat over there. First of all, Tara, I want to shout out to Tara. She's got a 4-month-old and she goes, "What do you mean sleep? I don't know what sleep is." Those are some dark times, Tara. As wonderful as having children and new babies, that is some hard times for parents when you're losing your sleep. And you know more than anything about how important that sleep is and what it does to you when you don't get it. So I want to get back to detaching from devices as well. The research shows here too that when we get very distracted. Number one, our brains, we have distracted brains to begin with. Our brains are always going from, you know, what's moving to what's going on. We're always looking around and scanning our environment. We're very easily get distracted. The phones, the way they have been created, they're distraction machines, whether it's notifications that come on. Or that we're always thinking about where they are. We feel naked if we don't have them on us. And so some of the things that we can do to actually detach from our devices is actually set aside time when we expect not to be carrying them. Arianna Huffington, in her book about sleep, talks about gently carrying your device out of your bedroom so that you can improve your quality of sleep and not have that phone there, not have a screen next to your bed that will be distracting and it's so tempting to go to. So there's lots of things that you can do to help detach from those screens, but we do know that when we are distracted by our phones and by our screens, we actually reduce our social interaction. Again, we talk, what are the key factors for resilience? Social support is one of them. And when we have our phones at the dinner table, research shows that we have less interaction with the people at the table. We have less satisfaction in the interaction with our table. So we're deliberate about setting our phones down, and not just turning your phone over and putting it down. It's actually putting it away someplace, turning it off so that it is not on your mind or on your body, and to be specific and intentional about doing that. I know it's hard to do. I tell you, it's especially depending on what job you have. Sometimes that phone is your lifeline. But if you're in an office that does texting or emails at night, saying, look, set the boundaries. I'm not answering my phone after X, or I'm not looking at text after X time. If it's an emergency, you can call me. I will have the call. The call ringer will be on, but I'm turning off my notifications, and you can do all that on your phone. So for me, these are some of the tricks that we get to rest our brain. Eric, anything more on this before we move on?
Well, I think one of the challenges of COVID in this period since March is we really are becoming overconnected and feeling not very productive. And we're finding that some of the best practices, not only to build resilience, but healthy boundaries in these very instant time, it's not to answer instamatically unless the email or the phone call is urgent. And that's really a responsibility of all of us, whether it's the senior leader, it's the front office, it's the secretary of the OMS, or the person who's in charge of the communication flow, is we need to be very intentional and very clear. When things are urgent, they need to be answered urgently. But not everything is an emergency. You can't have 10 first priorities. So part of setting healthy boundaries and making sure that you're taking care of yourself and other people really require us to be mindful, and you're going to hear this word a lot, of our activities, not only in the workplace but at home. So if you're not making your vacation plans now, and I know many of us have been very reluctant to, partly because of travel restrictions, partly to wanting to stay close to work, it doesn't mean we shouldn't be resting our brains throughout the day. So small wins. If you're signing off for the day, be intentional about it. Hey, I'm signing off for the day. If you need anything, let me know. I'll be done for 30 minutes. I'll be out of here for 30 minutes. And it really is being clear in your communication. So, Peter, I think we got to watch our time.
I do. Let's move on. I do want to shout out to Michelle threw out a deputy assistant secretary at her department that made it clear that if she wanted to be contacted on the weekends, you had to call, because she was not having her notifications on. So those are leadership things that you can do if you're leading a department, setting that tone, setting the organizational cultural values. So yeah, we're going to move along. So Eric, tell us about our daily resilience countdown.
Okay. All right. I'm a bit of a nerd, besides being a curmudgeon. And so we've modified this kind of simple process of 987654321 as a simple reminder. So let's throw up our poll right now, given the time. This should be self-explanatory. And if we're able to kind of do this for ourselves, we're setting an example not only for our family, our kids, whoever, but we're doing it hopefully at work too. And we're allowing ourselves to do things that are intentional, that are mindful, and that are resilient. So on this poll, which two of these things would you love to really improve upon? I'm going to let you know if you do. We'll put this up for about a minute, 2 minutes or so. If you don't have the ability to do the poll, go ahead and put it in the chat box, guys.
So for those of you who can't see the screen, if you don't have access to it, 9 is 9,000 steps, 8 is 8 hours of sleep, 7 glasses of water, 6 minutes of meditation, 5 servings of fruits and vegetables, 4 thank yous to friends and family, 3 meals and snacks, 2 unplugged relaxing activities, and 1 hour total of sweaty exercise.
Right, and the 5 servings of fruits and vegetables, thank you, USDA. I'm a big fan of your organization. They really advocate the use of healthy eating, which reminds us we should be practicing this on a daily basis. When you look at the poll here, to be quite honest, 6 minutes of meditation is 6 minutes of quiet time. 6 minutes of prayer, 6 minutes of just, like Peter said, leaving your cell phone in the other room, for God's sakes. I'm only begging, I'm pleading. 6 minutes. 6 minutes just to listen to your kids if you have them, or to an elderly parent. We're so busy, caught up in the day, that it's not surprising we feel exhausted at night, but then we don't feel rested in the morning. So this intentionality, this plan, this framework is for you to not only hold yourself accountable, but also to share it with other people in your lives. So let's take about 30 more seconds before we close the poll down.
And let's see those results.
Right. You know, Peter's made some serious achievements. Peter, do you mind if I say?
Go ahead.
Okay, Peter has lost 40 pounds. He's been very intentional.
45
with
actually.
exercise. How much?
45 now.
Oh, 45. Congratulations, Peter. And that's kind of inspired me to do some work on my own kind of frame right now. And I'm happy to say I've lost 10 pounds. Slow but sure, trying to be consistent, trying to not only practice what we teach and preach, but really embrace this model. And honestly, guys, I didn't believe in this concept 4 years ago. And so I'm a late adapter. As you know, I'm a bit cynical, but the reality is if we do this on a regular daily basis, the power to being our best selves at home and at work and to our friends, our families, our community can happen. So can we put up let's see how we did as a community. Let's see the results.
Okay, so
the one area we need to improve upon is
sleep is and exercise. Those two self-care key habits.
You know, we're seeing everybody going outside and walking and running, which is again a positive sign of taking a very negative event and using it. So Peter, I think again we're going to watch our time. We have 10 minutes. We still want to talk a little bit about team resilience, but I think you guys are really getting it. I appreciate the conversation that we're having. So in our next slide.
Next slide. And Eric, let me just say again, choose one of these things as a small, and looking for those small wins, and be intentional about it. Just choose one of these things, and it can start having that we call the keystone habit. It will have other positive effects in your life. And so many of you are sharing that in the chat box. I love that you're sharing so much. Thank you so much. We want to talk, end our discussion today talking about resilience leadership and how we can impact our teams. And when we talk about resilience leadership, we expect leaders in organizations. It actually doesn't have to be someone who's the chief or the division director or the DAS. You know, it can be anyone actually on a team can play a leadership role, but that's by modeling resilience. So these things that we've talked about, the personal resilience exercises and strategies and activities, if you model those, that's getting halfway to resilience. But how does somebody know if you're doing that? How does someone know if you're modeling resilience? You have to talk about it. You have to let people know. Eric, you want to talk more about modeling?
Yeah, I think, you know, we're very fortunate here in State Department, and we have a couple of colleagues online that I won't call you out on that have been inspirational to me. You know, I had this wonderful conversation with the leader in our department, and she not only talks the talk, she walks the walk. And the care and concern showing.
Eric, you froze up there. I don't know if that's you or me. I will continue if it's, because if it's Eric, then I'd say, okay, good. So we have a great colleague at State Department. She's terrific. She's actually been done a lot with us over the last year, actually sharing some of the notes that she sends out to post, sharing her messages of encouragement.
Okay, I'm back.
Okay, good. I just finished a little bit about what that colleague at State does, and how she shared her resilience messages with us over the last several months.
Right, and we have many other great examples of great examples. But not only are you modeling it, you're putting the word out there. And again, I consider you all to be leaders in public service. So the next level is taking it to modeling the behavior, to mentoring it. Mentoring is a very powerful thing, and this is something we should embrace in the federal government. So Peter, we have mentoring, and then we have the last one, which is fostering. And fostering really means creating the right environment that is based on respect, civility, and purpose. And we share that continuously throughout the year. We just don't take a one-session training event like today and say, oh, we're good with resilience. We really do this purposefully. Peter, are the slides not advancing?
They are.
Oh.
Are you not seeing them? I just put up the fostering team resilience slide, Eric.
Okay.
And we want to talk about this because this is, we talked about resilience leadership in the last slide. This is how do teams, what are the dynamics that make a resilient team? And we define team resilience as the capacity of a community to respond to change or disruption in a flexible, innovative manner with a focus on work productivity and respect for each other. And using that definition, we've identified these 4 C's, these 4 components that are critical to team resilience. Competence, and that's like, are we good at our job? Do we know what the job is we're supposed to do? Is everyone on board what we're supposed to be doing? And do we have the ability to do it? Number 2, commitment. Do we see the commitment from the members of the team? Do we see a commitment of the resources from our leaders toward getting to that mission and goal? The third piece is communication, and that, communication across any organization is cornerstone. It is, and are we having that level of communication where we know what each other is doing, where we know where we're going? Are we sitting down and setting a strategic plan for our team, and so that everyone is on the same song sheet? And finally is the consideration piece. How do we consider each other? That's how do we treat each other? Do we respect each other? Are we kind to each other? Are we giving people credit where credit is due? Simple things like that. I want to ask you, this is something Eric and I often do. We'll ask, what's the one that you think is the most important that you'd like to see improve on your own team, that you'd like to see your team work on? Throw that in the chat box of one of those C's.
Again, we can talk about the big picture, but I really believe that when we drill down, it is the zones of responsibility that we encounter every day, whether it's in the office, whether it's on the metro, whether it's on the, on the playing field. What is the zone of responsibility that you have right now that is most important?
And Eric, the answer's in the chat box. It is overwhelmingly the 2 that always come up in every session, every training that we do with folks across the foreign affairs community. It's communication and consideration. Those are the 2 that we're always needed to work on. It's never a one and done on any of those times. Just because you said thank you that one time doesn't mean you don't need to say thank you again, or just because you communicated once doesn't mean you have to keep communicating. So really, those 2 are really what we found are what our teams and your teams probably need to work on most. Eric, want to finish up with this?
Yeah, we have about 5 more minutes. So, Peter, you're going to have I'm not seeing the slides, so you're going to have to read them for me.
Okay, good. So we're gonna move along here and just offer up a chance for discussion. We got about 5 more minutes. Our takeaways were focusing on small wins, resting your brain, focus on the habits and routines that nurture resilience. And finally, the model, mentoring, and foster resilience. These are the takeaways we hope that you'll have. And we want you to think, what's the one thing you're going to take away from today's discussion? Throw that in the chat box as we move along. And we're going to have an opportunity to see what you write into the chat box, but also ask some other questions, some discussion questions. And we'd like to see some great stuff come up in the chat box, Eric. I'm not sure if you can see it. The rest of your brain piece, people seem to resonate with a lot of folks. The small wins, the self-care, exercise. These are all things that people want to do. Lots of great stuff. Being kind to self, self-compassion. Again, a huge part of building our resilience. So as we move forward over the last 5 minutes of this discussion, we would like you to share what are some stories of small wins that you've had recently, either personally or as a team. And also, what successful strategies have you or your agency used to adapt during this time of stress and uncertainty? I've already seen some folks throw some of that stuff up in the chat box. And as far as Eric and I are concerned, that's gold. That's stuff that we want to know more about. What are those great things that you're doing? So why don't we throw that out there? If anyone else wants to throw in there some of the small wins I'm seeing, Eric, or they've learned how to cook, This was a great great presentation. Thank you. I know you're moving on. Daily meditation, huge. That has a great physical impact on us as well. Through COVID hotspot, I also want to shout out to our friends at the VA. I know the VA put together, and this is one of our resources in our last slide, called a COVID app. And it allows, and a lot about the COVID app tells you all about the COVID crisis, the data, how to protect yourself, but also there's a component on resilient, how to stay resilient during the pandemic. So VA folks, great job on that. Eric?
You know, one of the things, and Peter, if we can go to the last slide, because Kim, we want you to have the final say today. Thank you for hosting us. But before we get there, you know, I'll be very frank with you guys, and you've been very honest with us when we appreciate it. This is not a one and done conversation. This has to be a continued dialogue. And if you meet resistance, whether it's leadership or cynicism or doubt, remember, we learn through example. We learn through our eyes, or we learn through talking about it or experiencing it personally. So, you know, you're going to meet resistance. Don't let that deter you. On the flip side of that, I honestly think, guys, and this is only speculation on my part, there are going to be people, colleagues of ours, that are going to really struggle with this period of time. And they may need support more than what we can give them as friends, as colleagues, as supervisors. You know, we have to break the stigma of mental health. So I like to say very honestly, get to know your EAP, get to know them before you need them. They're wonderful people. I know we have some EAP people, or here in the State Department, we call them employee consultation services, whether they're counselors, whether you contract it out. All these services are available to people within the federal government. Peter, do we have the Work Life for You slide up?
Yeah, the Work Life for You is up.
You know, this is a gem. If your organization prescribes to it or subscribes to it, take some time after today to explore what they offer and what they can give and contribute that enhances not only you as an employee, but as a federal government worker, as a leader, as a supervisor. But more importantly, like I said, get to know the people who are out there meant to support people who may be struggling at this time, personally or socially. So on that note, Peter, I think, is there anything else we want to cover?
I just want to say, shout out to, there's so much great support happening in the chat box. We have our friends from HHS who just put in the COVID Coach app.
Lovely stuff.
Just
great
stuff. And folks who are really appreciating that we're talking about employee assistance programs, because there's a whole range of where you can go with this, with resilience, whether it's learning about it through trainers like us or going directly for some help for counseling. Like Eric said, the stigma is not there anymore. I know.
Oh, it's still there, Peter. But we got to break through it, right?
But we're trying to reduce that for sure. So I just want to thank you guys all for being here today. This has been wonderful for us to share this with us, but also to mine this gold from our discussion in the chat box, to share amongst our federal family, friends. And I just want to thank Kim and her team for bringing us on board and being part of the Federal Leadership and Professional Development Seminar Series. Thank you so much.
So Kim, take us home.
Thank you so much, Peter and Eric. It's been a fantastic presentation today. Thank you all to the audience as well for participating. I'm going to be copying the things out of the chat box and sharing the nuggets that were shared in the chat. You'll all be receiving a survey link, so that'll come to your email that you use for registration. So please do fill out the survey. There are 2 additional discussion questions in there, which will be shared anonymously with the listserv. And I will be putting the recording for the seminar up on YouTube, and we'll share the link with the listserv as well. And the YouTube channel link is in all of your registration materials. So thank you all, everyone. Stay well and safe, and I'll see you at the next seminar.